Today we're discussing the intersection of creativity and AI with award-winning designer Peter Allinson. He's a top creative leader who's earned accolades from D&AD, Creative Pool, and more. As head of design, he shapes the vision for UKTV. As AI transforms the creative industry, we'll explore AI as both a tool and a disruptor. Will AI replace human creativity, or will AI shape a new era of collaboration? Let's discuss the future of design with Peter. Currently, you're the head of UKTV. So why don't we start by telling us a little bit about you in that role?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for having me, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about all things AI and design. So yeah, thank you for that intro as well. So I'm Peter Allinson. I'm head of design at UKTV, and that is part of the BBC Studios Group. And UKTV is a multi-award winning media company with 7 brands, and I'm fortunate enough to work across all of those brands. So they're mostly channel brands, UK-based channel brands, so the likes of Dave, Gold, W, Drama. But we also have our on-demand streaming service called UKTV Play, and as a company, we're really transforming to be more digital first and sort of digital focused. So really looking at that on-demand offering as the kind of North Star of our business moving forwards. So there will be some interesting and exciting work coming from us this year in terms of kind of rebranding and really sort of changing our business to be more digital first. But at UKTV, I essentially lead a team of designers and creatives, and we work across the entire portfolio of brands UKTV. So really lucky to kind of dip our toes in, comedy and crime and, scripted dramas, as well as things like documentaries and natural history documentaries. So a real range of content that we work across. And we work in the areas of design and advertising and innovation. So working on projects that span kind of creative campaigns where we promote our content and our brands, as well as sort of brand identity, so rebrands. Motion design, we do lots of motion. Obviously, we're a TV brand and more screen-based, so there's always going to be a lot of motion involved. So working in the motion graphics areas, as well as working with social media teams. So doing paid social media work, which is fairly similar to the work we do on air. It's very much promoting our shows and our brands, but doing it across various platforms through social media, and also kind of traditional, outdoor advertising, whether that's kind of printed billboards or more recently things like digital screens, as well as things like events, so big sort of showcase events where we showcase our content, and loads of other stuff in between. So, there's loads that we sink our teeth into. It's, a real mix of work across our portfolio of brands. And, my team consists of a kind of mix of graphic designers and motion designers. So we really touch on all aspects of design and, touch all areas of the creative campaigns. But the design team's only a small part of the wider department. So we're part of UKTV Creative. So that's about 40 creatives and producers and my designers. And that is, the UKTV Creative is part of a wider Marcoms, which is all about, marketing, communications, and creative. So, we work closely together. We collaborate all the time on projects. So, yeah, that's a kind of very quick overview of my team and department.
Yeah, and this is why I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to you. So obviously you're working at a large corporation, interacting with a lot of people, and also you're a creative leader. So you are obviously steering the team and guiding them. And that's the reason that I wanted to talk to you. So I'd love to get some of your views on AI and creative leadership. So this is kind of a broad question, and I hope it's not too big to jump straight into. We can break it down. But AI is obviously quite, it's a hot topic. It can be quite controversial. Some folks they're skeptical, and others are more excited. So I was just wondering, what's your kind of general view on AI? Are you skeptical, excited, or a mixture of both?
Do you know what? I've had a really interesting journey in relationship with AI, and I know it's only been around, a matter of a couple of years, really. But I think when I started to hear about generative AI, particularly generative AI, I was quite excited. I was very curious and interested. I was one of the fortunate few that got into the very first stages of Midjourney. So I was invited, and I was obviously playing around with it in very early beta stages. It was very interesting when I started to work with it. I kind of went down a mini rabbit hole of just trying things out and testing things, but it didn't really produce anything usable. It was quite interesting to kind of use it as a bit of fun here and there. But over time, kind of what I've noticed is that it is just like a runaway train, AI at the moment. It's, in a matter of months, it was version, I don't know, 9 or whatever it is. And, it has just come on leaps and bounds. And it's really technology, and I like to call them tools. I see them more as tools for creative work. But as I say, I've had this quite strange relationship in that it's a bit of a roller coaster. It's been very up and down, because it kind of piqued my interest. I was very curious to learn more and try things out. And then I kind of had this, and I was a bit like, this is going to be harmful to the creative industry, and it's going to take away jobs, and it's going to undermine design and things like that. And then I kind of realized that it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's the genie was out the bottle very early, and there's no going back. So the reality is that AI and generative AI is going to be part of our future, regardless of whether we like it or not. So I think over time, I kind of to myself, right, I should probably continue being curious, and I kind of jumped straight back into it again. At which point, Midjourney had, like I said, had kind of come on leaps and bounds. It was interesting. I actually I did a presentation on AI a few weeks ago, and one of the slides was to actually look at the generations that I created right at the beginning of Midjourney, and then exactly the same kind of prompts and exactly the same image that I wanted to get out of Midjourney about, what was it, probably about 15, 16 months later. And it was just, the difference was just incredible. It was like chalk and cheese. So that just demonstrated how quickly the technology is moving forward. And it's one of those. It's like when the internet came around. That didn't. There were people that were absolutely terrified of the internet. They thought it was going to be the end of humanity. It was the worst thing that had ever happened. And some people just thought, this is a bit of a fad. It's going to go away. It sounds interesting. It sounds exciting, but it's not. It's not going to be the future. And actually, we rely on the internet for our lives now. So it's one of those things where, once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back. And that's the kind of place where we are now. I think, you look at past advances with, digitizing images and, even sort of streaming music and TV. I work in TV. That's transforming very quickly. And it's kind of, I see those things in the past, and you look at Blockbuster, and they didn't embrace the technology. They didn't move with the times, and then they became quite irrelevant, and they went out of business. And Kodak as well. They kind of rejected what was coming down the line, and they ceased to exist to a certain degree. And I think that's kind of what we need to consider as creatives, is that this stuff is advancing and changing and improving all the time. Like I said, advances are happening every week, every month, and we really need to stay on top of what's changing. I think what's becoming quite apparent now is that I think there was this initial kind of rush. There was this initial excitement about AI. People were trying it out. It was a bit of the Wild West. Anybody could kind of test and learn with beta programs, and it just kind of it went a bit mad in the whole AI. And I think that's what sort of spread the news, and it became such a hot topic, which is probably, that's why we sat here talking about it. And I think over recent months, it's kind of died down a little bit. I think like the excitement and the novelty for some people it's worn off a little bit. But I think within industries that can really benefit from it, I think it's going to always be a topic of discussion. Like you say before, how we can start to use AI in our work streams and our workflows. How can it kind of benefit us, but how can we do that in a responsible way? And I think, as creative leaders or just anyone in the industry, really, we need to really think about responsible use of AI. So, there's loads of ways that I've kind of personally used it. I haven't really used it much in terms of work-based projects, but I've more sort of had just sort of side personal projects that I've explored, and in my spare time I've kind of looked at creating obviously imagery, how we could use imagery to create things like posters. I've done sort of dummy or sort of fan art movie posters, and I think it's quite interesting there to see how, I felt when you create an image that then becomes the poster, I feel a little bit cheated. I feel a little bit dirty in a way, because it kind of doesn't feel like my work. Whereas if you have an idea, if you have a really solid idea, a really solid concept, and you can start to use these tools to generate those assets that might be really difficult to find or might be really expensive to go and shoot, or you might not have the sort of best skills in 3D. You might be able to use those tools to kind of pull together assets that then become your creation, if you like. But I think that the fact of the matter here is it's your creation, and it's not the creation of a machine. I think that's the thing that I'm really kind of thinking about in my head, and just making sure that people don't think that these AI tools are the answer or the solution. That they generate the final output, but I see them more as tools to kind of help you get to where you want to be. And that, for me, that's really important, because actually our CMO Penny at UKTV, she talks about rigor and flair, and we want to put rigor and flair into a lot of our work. And for me, I think a lot of AI is just flair. It's just eye candy. It's just pretty pictures that you can prompt and get very quickly, but it's lacking that rigor. It's lacking that kind of emotion or that human connection. So, I'm always very conscious that there needs to be a solid idea or a kind of human truth behind it. Otherwise, it's just going to be a nice image. It's not, it might be something that you appreciate for a matter of seconds and just think, oh, that was nice. It's not going to have something that actually you resonate with, you think about. So I think that's the thing that I want to not lose, is that sort of emotional connection, that human touch. So it's about the execution, it's about the output. It's not just about the generation that AI gives you. And I think humans should challenge rather than just accept it. I think it's one of those things where we're in the creative industry, we're naturally curious, right? So I think we should always challenge these things rather than just let them do it for us. I don't think that we, as creatives, that would particularly sort of help us or fulfill us in any way. Like I say, if I've ever produced an image, I kind of see it. It's not my creation. It's not mine. And we all know that AI sort of mines all of the content that exists in the world. So it's very difficult to say that something is yours or original when actually it's kind of mining and pilfering from other things that exist in the world. So that in itself is a complex subject matter, because rightfully so, there's a lot of artists and illustrators and creatives out in the world that are quite wary and angry about AI, and that's because it's it's designed to look around the internet and be inspired and sort of mine things that already exist in the world. So I think it's really about sort of challenging it as creatives, and making sure that how we use it is responsible, and what we consider being a sort of final output is something that you can own and you can actually feel proud of at the end of the day. I think if you don't feel proud of what you've created because you don't feel ownership, then that's a very big problem. And I think my biggest worry is the next generation of designers and creatives, because I want to know what parts of their work. Well, I probably will need to know in the future what parts of the work they created, and what parts of the work was AI generated. I think this is for students particularly. They're probably seeing this as a huge advantage. Graphic design students are probably seeing this as a huge advantage to better their work overnight. But again, are they learning anything? Are they, are they learning about design? Are they learning about composition? Are they learning about how to create imagery in programs? Will that matter in 10, 20 years? I don't know. It's a really complex subject matter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, wow, that was kind of a lot to unpack there. That intro was pretty much like all of the questions I was going to ask you later on. You've touched on pretty much each one.
I'm sure we can dig deeper. I'm sure we can dig deeper.
Yeah, yeah. But no, like, yeah, to start at the beginning, like, it's interesting to hear, and I think a lot of creatives will be able to relate to this, is the path that you took. So, like, you were initially excited and intrigued by it, and then you were kind of like rejected a little bit, and then it was like ultimate acceptance. And I can totally relate to that because that's a mirror of my own journey, to be honest. Like, you first saw these tools like Midjourney and you were like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But it wasn't really useful. Like, it was still weird, but you were like, wow, this is possible. Like, and then there's like, as it you started seeing it getting better, or you just looked to the future. You was like, how long is this going to take to be, really good? And apparently it was like 12 to 15 months. So that was interesting. And then you kind of really spoke about the hype as well. And it does seem to be dying down, but I think in contrast to that, the hype's dying down. And people kind of got distracted. My opinion is people got distracted by, at the same time, before this, we had crypto and like blockchain, and we had metaverse, and people are like, oh, it's just another, hype cycle.
Yeah.
But the rate that it's improved, I think this is fundamentally going to change the creative industry
Yeah, and
for
I
a
think
lot of
I think in terms of the hype, I think there is going to be kind of moments where we probably will come to this anyway, but Sora obviously came onto the scene not that long ago, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why the hype has died down a little bit, because there was this release, everyone lost their mind. It was an incredible example of how AI in motion has absolutely just developed in the background without us knowing, and then suddenly they just dropped that bomb, and you were like, oh shit, this looks really good. Because I think that was one of my biggest kind of bugbears, and so I kind of lost faith in AI motion, because it just wasn't able to do much. It kind of had real limitations. It generated a lot of weird stuff. I actually recently did a runway competition. So obviously runway being the motion AI, so prompts motion program. And it was a 48-hour competition, which I was involved in. And you basically had 48 hours. They set you a brief on the morning of the Saturday. It was like 8 a.m. in the morning or something. You then had 48 hours to make a video. So you had to take the brief, come up with an idea, create a video, obviously use a music track or a voiceover, and create a film in 48 hours. And I didn't really know how difficult that was going to be. It was really tough. Luckily, I had an idea quite quickly, but just kind of generating, because what I did actually was I used Midjourney to generate images, and then I used Runway to animate those images. So it was a nice kind of mixture between some of the different tools. But what I didn't realize was how many generations you will have to create to get what you want, and then it doesn't animate very well, and you have to kind of pivot and find something else to fill that gap. And it went quite smoothly. It just was very time consuming. I know 48 hours is not a long time to create a short film, which I think is probably the point. They want to see what you can generate in 48 hours. I didn't actually sleep much during that competition. only because I'm a bit of a perfectionist anyway. And I kind of, if I was going to submit something or share something, I wanted it to be half decent. And it turned out quite well, actually. I was quite happy with it. But I always had problems with AI motion because, like I say, you could do elemental things quite well. You know, you could do smoke really well. You could do water quite well. You could do, you know, sort of leaves flying through the air quite well. So they did elemental things really well. But when it came to anything human, it was just really weird. It kind of, you know, a kind of leg would morph into an arm, or you know, if you turned someone's head, their face would just absolutely morph into something else. And so they really struggled with that, and I kind of struggled with it as well. And I thought there's not, you know, if this is as good as it's going to get, which I knew it wasn't going to be, but I just didn't think with Midjourney moving so quickly and advancing so well in image, I thought that, you know, the motion side of things was going to take a lot longer. And then suddenly out of nowhere, I think it must have been a matter of weeks after I did this run journey competition, the Sora update dropped, and I was a bit like, right, well, I'm not gonna. As soon as that's available, I'm gonna give it a go, and you know that's gonna kind of trump everything. But again, you know, I don't like to actually believe what I see until I've tried it myself. You know, I've been sort of tricked in the past. I think there was Pika did a bit of a drop with some of their motion AI, and then I tested. I got my hands on it and sort of tested it, and it was nowhere near as good as the sort of launch that they revealed. You know, obviously they want to show their best in class, but it just wasn't great. So I'm really interested to see what the Sora stuff is like to work with, and how easy it is to get the examples that they've shared. I know you've spoken to
Yeah.
some directors or some creatives that have actually worked with it, and I can't wait to get my hands on it personally. But
Yeah, like that was a like I spoke to Nick Cleveroff this week, and he's blown away by it. Like I said, what's the process like? And he's like, oh, it's like I can't remember exactly which word he used, but it's like it's fantastic, like it's amazing.
yeah,
But it's still AI, like, and you know from using these tools that they're imperfect. Like you have to like re-roll things like a lot, and this like even with Midjourney is a still image, so when we scale that up to video, obviously like words aren't, they're not, like they're low bandwidth,
yeah.
like, you know, when you're inside an animation program you can set keyframes and scales and
Yeah,
rotations
you've
and
got
all
control
things.
over that.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, whatever you can kind of generate from these things, you don't have a good degree of control. I think that's why I found, you know, when I was talking about creating those movie posters, if you start to generate those images and those kind of parts that you want to then composite together, you know, you've got creative control. You know, you've got an idea, or you know, you've got the skills and the knowledge to be able to do that in the first place. But you know, using it as a tool to sort of generate those things that you might not be able to get. And I think, you know, even in our line of work, we don't use AI here in terms of, you know, Midjourney, things like that. But you know, even experimenting with it, like you say, that the images aren't big enough for us to start using for big, you know, 48 sheet billboards. And what we actually do is, you know, when we talk about key art, which is basically our key image that we use to promote the show, you know, we create that artwork massive. You know, it has to be a huge canvas that we can use in landscape and portrait and various different sizes and formats. And I just don't think at the moment, you know, the images that these kick up are going to be usable for the real world executions. But you know, that there is things like what I find quite interesting is that there's a lot of sort of additions or widgets, whatever you want to call it, to other programs that actually become really useful. So, you know, even in Photoshop, so we use Photoshop, we use Adobe products all the time. That's our bread and butter. You know, we use that every single day. And, you know, you're starting to see AI features kind of creeping into those programs. So even with Photoshop, you know, you can use AI to do the generative fill. I'm sure you've seen that and have heard about it. But you know, even when we've got an image that we need to extend to create our key art canvas or our key art size, That's actually proving to be quite a helpful feature in Photoshop.
It's amazing.
Even when you sort of select things and say, take away the glasses, or put a hat on, it is quite amazing. But again, I think it comes back to what we were saying before. It's not kind of it's giving me layers where it's kind of done that, and I can switch it off and I can change it, but it's not the optimum artwork that I come to expect us to kind of create. So there's a real fine balance between kind of using these features and then just making sure that we don't cut corners and we don't kind of use AI as a bit of a shortcut to things. I still want to make sure that even if we use features that kind of help us or speed up processes, that it doesn't diminish the work. I think that's the thing that I am really conscious of, is that yes, I can use these things in my spare time and it's fun and it's interesting. But, when it comes to your professional day job, I look for excellence. I look for, a good finish. It needs to be, really well produced. So, for me, I think we use it with an element of caution. As I say, we don't use any of the sort of generative AI products like Midjourney or Runway or anything like that. We don't use that in house. I only do that personally. Whether that's changed, I don't know.
Is that because the quality issues that you mentioned, or is that because of the copyright concerns?
I think it's mostly around the copyright concerns. I mean, of course, we can, if we used it, we can manage the quality control, and we can decide not to use any elements, or to go ahead with it. But I think it is the kind of copyright usage concerns that most people are a little bit wary of kind of using and utilizing, just because it's so unclear at the moment. I know there have been some laws passed and there have been some rules and regulations put in place recently, but I've got a feeling that those things are going to change quite often and quite regularly over time. So I
Yeah.
think we're sort of erring on the side of caution. So I'm part of the AI steering group at, BBC Studios, and there's obviously a few discussions around AI and how we can use that in terms of cutting time, and in terms of looking through content and stuff like that. But like I say, it's a really early discussion, and it's kind of hard to say whether we can or can't use things at the moment. So at the moment, it's we don't use it until we know more. And I think even if we do start to use them in the future, I would probably feel more comfortable to start to integrate these into the process in a responsible way. So even if we were to start to use these generative models in our process, I would be more comfortable doing it at idea generation or ideation stages, and then through to possibly the pre-production stage, and that could help with visualizing ideas, or creating mood boards, or just trying to express your idea. That could even be through storyboards or something like that, or through some motion tests or image tests. But I think once we've got to the stage where we're going into production, I, I think that's probably where it will end. So we'll use it almost as a tool to kind of help us get to production stage, and then we would go out and with a photographer to get the image that we need, or hire a crew to get the footage that we need. So I think I personally don't think it's going to impact a lot of the sort of creative production side of things, but it certainly could help in terms of getting the idea to a presentable stage and getting that approved and across the line. So essentially, the kind of part of the process where nobody will see it. So it's very much an internal process. I think anything that you start to produce that's going to be seen externally, you know, we will need to be really conscious of and careful about.
Yeah, it's that's what a lot of people, when you get to kind of companies of your size, there obviously needs to be a legal team involved, and just the uncertainty and risk is kind of, people are pretty much a hard no at this point. And it will be really interesting to see how Sora changes that. Like, if you can, like, your team's probably going to want to use it. Like, if you can create your own b-roll, like a 2-3 second clip that you would normally have to go and search on a stock site, it's a ball ache, you don't find what you want. Like, if the clips we've been seeing, which might be cherry picked, they probably are cherry picked, but to what degree we don't really know. But it'll be interesting to see when it achieves this level, like how and if people can start.
Yeah, I think with, as you were touching on the Sora stuff, there was, I think one of them was, it called AirHeads, where
Yeah, yeah, the one with the yellow balloons for
balloons the
heads.
heads. Like, I kind of watched that, and it did kind of blow my mind because I was like, that's just a great video. I could see that it was AI generated in parts. Like, it was an amazing advancement. But even just the kind of idea of it, and there was also a short kind of behind the scenes interview with the creators that was really interesting. And they were talking about how they were given this thing, Sora, and their anything was possible. They kind of, it blew their minds, and that then just gave them this idea of like a sort of balloon head, and then they started to draft a narrative around that. And I think from what I heard, they really struggled to have that continuity of look through the piece, but they did a really good job of it in the end. But even that as an example, you can see there's professionals behind it. It was a really great idea. It was well put together. Even the kind of scripts and the voiceover was really well done. So I think it is one of those things where with this advancing technology, it's only as good as the people that use it. My prediction for the future is probably going to be that anybody can kind of get their hands on Midjourney, and I think there's just going to be an absolute churn and a dump of AI generated imagery over the years, which is just going to inevitably start to feed its own machine, and it's going to start to just regurgitate the same kind of stuff. And I suppose it's going to be very difficult in the future to do an image search and actually know whether it's going to be AI generated or not.
Yeah, historians have got a real problem on their hands. Like,
Yes, I mean that is part of the problem, right? Is that this is an absolute, for anyone that wants to change history, and anyone that wants to try and influence the future with things like I don't want to go too political, but with things like president elections coming up, and misinformation and fake news and all of that lot. Like, this is an absolute godsend for anyone that wants to spread fake news or very quickly create a false narrative around certain things. So that's a whole nother discussion around how AI could be a bit of a slippery slope moving forward, and how we all need to be very responsible in how we use it moving forward.
yeah, I think it's going to be difficult because at the moment, I know Adobe and other people are working on these systems to label AI images created as being AI images, but it's going to be a little bit of an arms race. Like, if the AI can label it, then AI can also unlabel it, you know?
Well, I think Adobe are one of the companies that are actually moving it forward quite positively. So obviously with their Firefly AI, that is essentially a walled garden. So it's they're basically mining images that they own. So they've already said that if you're using Firefly and any images that you create using their product is challenged or goes to court, they will represent you. So you will have the full force and might of Adobe behind you to support you. And that's purely because they're trying to create something that industries and large corporations feel safe to use. It's inevitably not going to be as good as these kind of mass models like Midjourney, because it's looking at billions and billions of pieces of data, whereas obviously the Adobe stock or library is a lot smaller, so the outputs won't be quite as impressive. But having said that, if I could start using, or if we could start using something that is safe and, you know, protected, then that's only a good thing, right? I mean, if AI is not going to go away and everyone else is going to start using it, there needs to be a time when it's a bit of a level playing field for bigger organizations. Otherwise, they're, just going to get left behind, and that would be a shame.
Yeah, I find Adobe really interesting. Obviously, they're doing all the work around trying to make it, safe to use all the images, but they have to walk a very fine line. Like, creatives are worried about their jobs being automated,
Yeah,
and Adobe are hopefully bringing in these tools that help us like mold it and use it. But on the other hand, there's this kind of danger that they might go down this automation route. And there was one feature on their website when they first launched Firefly, and it turned a storyboard into a video.
mm.
Like, you'd upload a video and the AI would create. You upload the storyboard, sorry, and then the AI would create this video. And like, the demo they had on the website was amazing. And it's been probably well over a year, and they've not released that. And the reason I think they've not released that is because that's directly taking jobs away from, you know,
Yeah,
the people who pay for their software.
yeah, absolutely. And that's I look at LinkedIn very often, and there's a lot of discussion around that, and there are people that are worried for their jobs because the kind of skill and the craft that they have developed and learned over the years is kind of just it seems like it's being taken away from them, and anyone can kind of generate a very similar image that they've spent years and years honing and learning. And I do think there will be a time, and it might come sooner than we think, where actually craftsmen and women come at more of a premium because people just want that human touch and that kind of absolute certainty that it's come from a human hand and mind. And the speed at which AI is developing, I think, will also in turn speed up the attitudes around it. So, like we've said already, it's kind of, there was loads of excitement and everyone was talking about it, and it was, everyone was getting very excited and probably overexcited, and now it's kind of calmed down a little bit. And I think that's going to happen in terms of attitudes around it, in that people are willing to pay a premium for something that is crafted. Unfortunately, that will obviously, the industry for that will narrow down significantly, and it will only be a few of the very best that may do really well in the future. But you know, it's really hard to predict. It's one of those things where I will want to continue to work with really talented people rather than rely on machines to do it for me. And I don't think I'll ever lose that attitude. I much prefer working with people, collaborating with people, because you get better outcomes, you get different outcomes than sitting in a corner somewhere typing prompts. And I know some people actually find things like ChatGPT quite helpful. I think freelancers that work on their own, they find ChatGPT really helpful as a sort of sounding board. They almost throw ideas out to ChatGPT and they answer back, and it's a bit of a back and forth conversation, which I find really interesting, quite strange, but really interesting. But I think in the way that I work and the environment that we work in, it's such a collaborative environment, and we work with so many people that I can't see that getting lost. I think it would be a real shame,
Yeah.
and it means that the work would only suffer as a result, personally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's some early losers, and I would say the early losers, and you've touched on this earlier, is kind of the concept artists. Like, if people are using this in their process to come up with the idea, and then they take that to a photographer to shoot it, or they take it to an illustrator to actually, turn it into something that they can use. These are kind of the early losers. But it's interesting. So if everyone, I think there might be some regulation pretty soon, like we've seen in the EU, to kind of protect jobs. That
Similar to the writers' strike and the acting strike, isn't it? It's although there was a lot to that, some of it was around, and they striked for months and months. It was quite incredible. They carried on for far longer than I thought they would. But they got the deal they wanted, and I think they're going to be protected for the next few years, and I think that's a real milestone in terms of kind of protecting people's jobs against AI. I think once that deal's up, things would have changed so quickly and significantly that who knows what the future is going to hold at that point.
well, that's kind of the whole. I'm not too confident that that deal will kind of protect them too much. The whole concept of kind of Sora is not to create a video model; it's to create a world simulation. And once you have a model that can simulate the world, like you could
Yeah.
like direct digital avatars, you can put cameras anywhere you want, like you can swap them in and out. It's going to be a whole different filmmaking
Yeah,
process.
totally. But I still think, that's still a filmmaking process, right? You still need those filmmakers. You still need those creatives, those directors. You need somebody with understanding and talent of how to craft captivating and quality piece of content. So I think, I always come back to there are these tools that are being developed. There's a lot that's out in the world at the moment that people are using. But I think you only really get the best things from people that know what they're doing. And as I say, I see these things as tools rather than a solution to a problem. I think just like when After Effects came around, it was a tool to create motion graphics. When Photoshop came around, it was a tool to create imagery and manipulate imagery. It's almost like AI, although it's a slightly different beast, and ethically is quite a lot more complicated. It's still a tool for you to create something and for you to create an output. I My biggest concern is what you've kind of touched on there, is that although people like AI, Adobe are stamping things that's generated in AI. And I think there's a lot of discussion around if you have used AI, you need to watermark it that it's been made using AI, or you need to put it somewhere. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be, because it's if it's going to start being used everywhere and anywhere, we're not going to be badging everything with an AI symbol. So I think that's going to be a bit of a complex kind of rule to stick to or stick by. But I'm always going to. It's going to be a future where I'm going to be looking at imagery and I'm going to be looking at a video, and rather than kind of scrutinizing it like, oh, is it used green screen there? Is there a bit of VFX there? Is that live action? I'm probably going to be first thinking, is this AI generated, or is this been created, with a film crew, or, by a talented motion graphics artist? It's going to be quite hard to tell. And like even the recent Anthony Joshua, was it Under Armour commercial,
Yeah.
that had a lot of heat and a lot of negative feedback. I mean, I watched it and it was very good. So it was actually one of those things where I think that made those responses even more passionate and even more worrying, because yes, they did use AI in a lot of that stuff, but actually they used it quite well, which is a stark contrast to things like in the past, when Secret Invasion, when they did their opening title sequence for, Disney commissioned AI models to start to create this title sequence for Secret Invasion. And, that was the typical back in the day, uncanny valley, looks really weird. And, they came out saying, oh, it's about sort of people hidden in sight, and it's about sort of paranoia and not really knowing what's real or not. And that's the idea around it, which I thought was pretty. I mean, I get the idea, but it was still quite poorly chosen. Also, this was right at the beginning of the strikes when AI was a hot topic, and yeah. So I think in terms of how things are being used, it's kind of moved on a lot. But I think sort of identifying it in the future is going to become very tricky. And when I'm starting to hire, I touched on this before, but when I'm starting to hire new designers, so if I'm hiring a junior designer or a sort of graduate designer, I'm going to need to know what they're capable of. And if I just see a portfolio of AI generated stuff, it might look incredible, but actually they might not be able to do anything. They might just be coming to an interview with stuff that they've prompted. And if I want a good prompt specialist, I would advertise it as that. And that is a role in the world these days, is prompt specialists. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah. I think the way it's going to go, and it might be harder for people who are starting out, but it's kind of like a trend I'm seeing at the moment is like kit bashing. So you might start with the kind of the AI generated image. I mean, you've got software like Magnifique that can upscale it 10x now.
Yeah.
And it's not just upscaling, it's using AI to kind of change the image to what it thinks it would be. So then you could drop that into Photoshop and you could like clean it up if you have the skills, which might be difficult for people that are starting out, but it's not that difficult really.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of kit bashing in the video world. Like now you can take a photo of, a character that you create and you can bring it to life. Like you can give it a 3D model and animate it. Now we've got lip syncing, all these things, and they're not at the level of Sora yet. But if you could add that fidelity and this kit bashing mentality, I think that's probably the direction we go in.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that comes back to things like, character animators, and like I can absolutely see how this is troubling and how it's scary in that there's just all of these things that are constantly being developed and improved and advanced, and it's doing what has taken years to learn overnight. So I can absolutely, I think as creative leaders, we need to be aware of that. We need to really understand that these things are incredible, and yes, we could use those, but what's the right thing to do? So I think there's a real balance between kind of having that sense of curiosity and creativity, but also having that sense of empathy. And some industries are a bit more empathic than others. A lot of industries are looking at cutting costs and doing things quicker, but I think that's where sort of creative leaders in our industry kind of really need to stand up and have that empathy for others and understand that perhaps the way you're doing things is not the best way to grow our industry and inspire our industry. I don't want to be in a world where we're just crediting AI models. Like that would be really shit. And I want to make sure that we kind of grow and we develop really talented people in our industry. And like I say, we start to use and embed these AI features into the process that elevates their work rather than just does it for them. I think it's a really good opportunity and an exciting time to be in the creative industry. But also, to be a good designer or to be a good creative, you need to know the fundamentals. So to be a good designer, you need to understand and have access to the fundamentals of design. So, things like layout and how you use typography and how you use color and scale and negative space and all of these things that are so important to and kind of creating quality work that people take notice of and appreciate. If you don't know those fundamentals, then AI is your get out of jail free card, essentially. So,
Yeah.
I'm just really hoping that this elevates the work as a tool. And there's still the people coming into the industry and developing through the industry still have that appreciation for good design and good execution. And if you have that understanding, then you're going to create incredible work. But if you don't, you're just going to have to rely on what something kicks up for you, what something generates for you, which
Yeah.
is not a good position to be in, really.
I think you've touched on kind of something that's kind of important, which was collaboration. Like if you could sit in your corner of your room and everyone does have these skills now, but so what makes standout work? Like what makes kind of exceptional work? And it might be that it makes us more collaborative. Like yeah, we could do it on our own, but you need that spark, you need that idea to make it something kind of exceptional. So I just realized that we've been chatting for an hour.
Wow, that's quite a long time. But yeah, it's always good to catch up on these things. And even kind of talking about this is, you remind yourself certain things and you remind yourself about the responsibilities that you have and, the ways of working and how you can better things or how you just need to be very mindful of other things. And like I say, it's an exciting future. I think we just need to be careful about how we start to utilize these things and also, think about the work, but also think about the people that are involved and think about the industry that it may be harming. So yeah, like I said right at the beginning, I've got a very complicated relationship with AI.
I would agree with you on that. Like I do this podcast, but I have conflicting opinions. I mean, what does excite me is okay, Sora, for example, looks like, it almost looks like reality. But what really excites me is kind of like the new things that these tools can do. Like what can you do with Sora that you couldn't yesterday? And like just a quick example would be like you can loop a video. So you can go back forwards, you can go forwards and backwards in time. So you can take the first frame of the video and ask it to render.
Seamless loop.
Yeah, so that's just one, the example that they've put on the website. And when people get these tools and it advances more, then when it gets in artists' hands, we'll see what's really possible. Like, and I think the world's gonna get like really weird,
Yeah,
you know.
I think it is. I mean, it's even, even this morning I saw a quick demo of Suno, I think suno.com, which is
Yeah,
where you can create bespoke music. So you can, again, it's a sort of prompt generator, but you can ask it to write a song for you, or you can input some lyrics, and it creates this bespoke song in the style you ask for. And some of the music that it comes out with is quite astonishing. It sounds almost kind of studio production level. And maybe in a few years, what we hear on the radio or what we listen to on Spotify could be AI generated, and there's AI pop stars or whatever. It's like it's going to be a strange world to see what happens.
yeah, it definitely is. And like, it's been a great conversation. I feel like I could probably talk to you for another hour about this, but I'll be respectful of your time. So, I mean, thanks for chatting to us today.
No, thank you for having me. It's been really good.
All right, nice one. Thanks.
Cheers, Luke.
If you like this video, you love our weekly newsletter, sign up at designresources.ai.